It's the morning of July 2nd, 1863. The 9th Massachusetts Battery, attached to the Army of Potomac's Artillery Reserve, will march from Taneytown, Maryland, and go into park behind the lines just south of the Granite Schoolhouse Road. They'll be held here in reserve, but not for long. When General Dan Sickles moves his 3rd Corps to the Emmitsburg Road, upwards of 3/4 of a mile ahead of the Union line on Cemetery Ridge, his men are stretched thin. His line now runs from the Kadoorie Farm to the Devil's Den. To plug the holes, he asks for support and receives it in the form of Colonel Freeman McGilvery's 1st Volunteer Brigade of Artillery Reserve. Captain John Bigelow of the 9th Massachusetts, along with McGilvery and others, scouted the land of the Trousseau Farm. The artillery would be placed along the Wheatfield Road, the furthest right at a peach orchard cornering the Emmitsburg Road. Bigelow's 9th were placed on the far left, furthest from the salient of the peach orchard. His men are green but disciplined. This will be their first engagement. So let's back up for just a moment. Their day is going to start here in Taneytown. General Meade is going to have a headquarters at the Trinity Lutheran Church in town and a field headquarters at the Shunk Farm, which is somewhere around here. I've got to be close. All the streets are named Meade and Hancock and the like, so it's got to be somewhere around in this area. They would get orders to go to Gettysburg and arrive there by late morning, early afternoon. It was reported that they lost a cannoneer and a caisson due to an explosion caused by the condition of the Taneytown Road, but on they went to end up here. This is the Artillery Park, also known as the Spangler Farm. It is located off of the Blacksmith Shop Road, just south of the Granite Schoolhouse Lane, and it's here that the men would have just a little bit of time to wait. And in that time, they'd also have time to glimpse some Rebs for the first time. A lot of time. They would go over to the hospital barn at the Spangler Farm, or possibly to where the 4th New Jersey Volunteers, the Provost Guards, were. Assigned to look after stragglers, prisoners, and all kinds of miscreants and ne'er-do-wells, they could probably see 1 or 2 there. Remember, the men of the 9th were seeing action for the first time. They had never seen a rebel. They would soon see more than they would need to, because shortly after 4 p.m., they would be called to action. At the order attention, we all sprang to our places and cleared our guns of grain for action and immediately filed out of the field at the corner nearest to us. We skirted fields, followed by roads, and halted in a field southeast of the Trousseau House. Okay, so they made it from Taneytown to the Artillery Park, and now from the Artillery Park to the Trousseau Farm behind me. See it back there? It's the Trousseau Farm. They've made it here. So at this point, Bigelow, probably McGilvery, some other lackeys have decided they need to check out this area and see where they need to be. What they do is they head out to my right into the field of the Trousseau Farm. Give you a bit of an eye look at it. And up towards the Wheatfield Road. In that direction is where they'll set their guns. Now I want you to remember these numbers. 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're playing lucky or feeling lucky, play those numbers. 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember those numbers. So, like I said, it's probably, I don't know, somewhere around 4 o'clock right now. As far as time is concerned, you can ask 5 different guys what time it is, and you'll probably get 7 different answers. Time, for lack of a better way to put it, is not really an exact science yet. So, everybody's clock is different. Everybody's watch is different. They're probably all setting them by church bells, and who knows if the church bells are right. So, so I say around 4 o'clock, could be 3:30, could be 4:30. I don't know. If you find somebody who says they know exactly what time they got here, grain of salt. So, here they are at the Trossel farm. They're going to work their way up this way to the, I guess that would be the southwest, towards the Wheatfield Road, and we'll pick it up there. See you. So the fighting has now started, and the 9th is really in the thick of it. They would line up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1 being closest to the peach orchard on the right, and 6 being closest to the wheat field on the left. Now, Bigelow would realize that cannons 5 and 6 didn't really have too much of a line of fire that they could deal with, so he would order them to go around the back and line up on the other side. So now the cannons would order up cannon 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. They would start first firing in a distant woods all the way across the Rose farm at pretty much Cabell and Alexander's cannons, and after that they would begin to fire actually into the Rose farm, both the house and the barn. There were snipers there, and they did a good job of taking care of those. At this point also, Kershaw's men were coming down past the peach orchard, headed towards the Rose woods. They originally had turned towards them, and they were coming at them. They took a mistaken order and turned towards the Rose woods and towards the wheat field, at which point Bigelow's guns could really lay into them. It was like setting up bowling pins for them. So they really did some damage to Kershaw's men then. But also at this point, the peach orchard salient was starting to cause a lot of trouble, and the men there, 21st Mississippi, were coming down into this area. So now you have Barksdale's 21st Mississippi coming from their right, the 9th Massachusetts right, and you have Kershaw's men in front of them. So it's starting to become a bit untenable for them there, and as it is at this point that they are ordered to limber up and get out of there. Bigelow thought differently, though. He told McGilvery he would retire by prolong, firing as they went back. The pressure from his front and now right were entirely too much. It would be too deadly for his men to try to limber up at this point. Okay, one little quick thing about this area. It's a marshy mess. It's marshy, it's hilly, there's boulders all over the place, and these guys are trying to get cannons back this way. So remember that. Sketchy land. So the guns recoil with the help of the men would bring them back here, the Trossel farm. Again, they would still be in order. 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is not a really good spot for artillery. If I turn around, you'll notice I'm suddenly downhill. Not a good spot. So let's talk for a moment about Barksdale and his brigade of Mississippians. Barksdale was himself a fire eater, a radical secessionist. His men, after being held back, would come out of the woods screaming like banshees. They would make their way from Seminary Ridge to the Emmitsburg Road and roll through the Union lines there. This would go down as one of the great charges of the war. Barksdale would lead the charge that day on horseback, all the time urging his men, "Forward! Forward!" He would be mortally wounded on the field near Plum Run. He'd be carried off the field by Union troops and die the next day at the Hummelsbaugh farm. Indignant to the end, while captive and dying, he insisted that Lee would still show them a trick or two. So the guns' recoil with the help of the men would bring the 6 guns back to the Trossel farm. Bigelow would order them to limber up. The first 2 on the left, guns 3 and 4, would go first. One would overturn, blocking the gate, and the next would be pulled straight over the fence. The first was righted and removed. They would fire solid shot into Barksdale's men, and most would move further to the 9th's right to avoid it, going north of the Trossel farm, save the 21st Mississippi. They would fire canister into Kershaw's South Carolinians, all the time moving back towards the Trossel house and barn where Sickles had his headquarters. Just then, Colonel McGilvery came up and, as Bigelow recalled, told him that there were no infantrymen in back of him along the line which Sickles moved out. He must remain where he was and hold his position at all hazards, if need be, until at least I can find some batteries to put in position and cover you. They were cramped into a corner at the bottom of a hill. Ammunition would be laid at the guns to save time. Barksdale's men were now upon them, not to be denied even in the face of double canister. They would fight on in vain. McGilvery would finally give the order to retreat. Bigelow would go down. He would be raised on a horse by the battery's bugler, Charles Reed, and slowly brought to the rear. That would earn Reed the Medal of Honor. Along with the human casualties would be the loss of 80 of 88 horses killed or wounded, upwards of 60 dead. The 9th Massachusetts Battery brought enough time for McGilvery to get his artillery into place. John K. Norwood of Gun 5 would spend it in this area. John B. Stowe of Gun 6 would spend it further up the hill. Let's go pick up his story. So here we are, back on the field where the fighting really started to go bad for the men of the 9th. The number 1 man on the 6th piece, John B. Stowe, falls somewhere in here shot through the body and left on the field. He recounts his story in the History of the 9th Massachusetts Battery by Levi W. Baker. About the time we had orders to fix Prolong, I was shot through the body. I went to the rear about 20 yards and fell senseless. Soon recovering consciousness, I heard the order to fall back. Corporal Whitney got me on my feet and tried to get me back with him. I could not help myself at all, and he was obliged to lay me down, gave me his canteen full of water, and reluctantly left me. I saw the enemy's line advancing and watched them till they marched over me and halted at a stone wall near some woods, and there they remained till dark, then fell back over me and threw out a picket line. I was left between the picket lines. There I was all night, with none but the dead, save now and then a ghoul in gray, searching the dead and stripping them of their clothing. If seen by our pickets, they were fired on and driven away. The night was long and dark to me. I thought if the boys could, they would come for me. Toward morning, a man in gray came near me. He appeared to be looking about, but not trying to strip any bodies. He stood looking at me, and I put out my hand and touched his foot. He jumped as if surprised. He probably thought me dead. On recovering, he stooped down, asked me where I was shot, if I was cold, and got a rubber blanket and got it under me, and covered me with 2 of woolen. He sat by me some time, talking, till it began to be light, then gave me his canteen of water, saying he must get back to his post. Daylight was welcomed, and with it the gray line advanced and occupied the position of the night before, and I was again inside the enemy lines. They opened fire, and the shot and shell came from all directions, and I almost gave up. I laid here till about 4 p.m. the 3rd day, when I decided to try and move if I was killed. I made slow progress in crawling, but persevered till I reached a spring near the oak tree. As I approached, the pickets on the enemy's outpost saw me, raised his hand, and no one fired at me, although the pickets were firing all the time. There I stopped, drank, and rested. Still the leaden hail was dropping around me. Next, still on my hands and knees, I tried to reach the house, Trossel's, through which, as I entered, passed a cannonball. The next day, the 4th, I was taken to the 2nd Corps Hospital, and that night, with thousands of others, lay uncovered through a heavy rain. July 5th, William Strong and Charles Tibbets found me and had me carried to a house on the road to the village. So John K. Norwood of Gun 5. Remember, the guns are now in order from right to left, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they've retired and prolonged all the way down this hill back towards the Trossel farm, which is behind me. General Sickles' headquarters would be over there, and that's not far from where probably Norwood would be. Now, Norwood also, like Stowe, would be shot through the body and left on the field. So let's recount his story now. Okay, behind me is the monument for the Dan Sickles headquarters here on the second day. As I turn the camera around, you'll see the trestle barn behind me, and it's right up there where he was wounded and taken off the field. But it's here, or right behind here in the field behind this monument, where John K. Norwood would be shot and his real trials would start. So Norwood is shot somewhere in this area, really behind me, and he will basically make it his way to his cannon and kind of crawl under it and wait there. He's shot through the chest, and as you can imagine, he's not feeling really good about his situation at the moment. A private blade cell will come to him and help him get further underneath his cannon for a little more safety. Blade cell is uninjured, and during the basic chaos of what's going on in this area, the 21st Mississippi is coming through here fast, and they're on the cannons, and they have pretty much overtaken this area. Blade cell basically asked for permission to go and get Norwood some water, and in just the sheer and utter chaos of this time, they say, yeah, go ahead. So the Confederates do. So he gets goes get some some water, brings it back to him at the cannon, and at that time, him and some Confederates, because they're just kind of milling around, some of them around in this area now. They're just kind of, it's so chaotic, all that's gone through. They've basically gone through past what would be behind me, heading towards Cemetery Ridge, but there are still some Confederates milling around here, and they actually assist Blade Cell in getting Norwood to the rock that is now named after him. I'm trying to get to it right at the moment. I'm going to get close enough to it so you can see it behind me. It's June, and it's quite grown up around here now. But they get him, oh gosh, it's about 50 yards. Came from back in that direction. That large tree you see behind me is the witness tree at the Sickles monument, the cannon to his headquarters. And they they take him all the way over here to, excuse me, I'm trying not to lose my footing, to this rock that's behind me. That is the Norwood rock. And they lean him against that rock right where you see right there. And the battle, Blade Cell just says, sorry buddy, but I got to get out of here. He gets out, leaves him water, and he's able to, through the night, keep his wound moist with the water that he leaves him. And the Confederates continue milling around here and moving further, I guess that's east, northeast, or southeast? Northeast, sorry about that. And just towards Cemetery Ridge. And he's left here. He's left to stay at that rock all night. He does exactly that. He just leans against that rock all night. At the point of the evening, this is really no man's land / rebel territory. So he's pretty much behind the lines at this point. He lays here all night. He says at one point, actually rebels get behind the rock and are shooting over him as he's just standing there waiting to be helped. The next day he does, on the 3rd, he does, with the help of some rebels, make it over to the trestle house, and I'll walk over there right now because you can see about how far away this is. It's probably about, I don't know, 50, maybe 100 yards, not that far. But he makes his way, with the help of Confederate soldiers, over to the trestle house, which is right back here. So you can see it's not that far. I'm probably 25, 30 yards from the Norwood Rock, and it's another, 50, 60 yards, maybe 70 yards to the trestle house. So that's basically how he spends the night, just leaning against that rock and just waiting. Having water got him through. Like he says, if it wouldn't have been for the water to keep his wound moist, then he may not have made it. And it's just odd, with the help of all the Confederates that came through here to actually help him get to the rock and to get to the Trossel house, which became a bit of a I don't know if you'd say hospital, more of a way station, a place for Union troops, injured Union troops to go before they moved on to a hospital. But that's how he spent the night here. That's amazing. Just to think that you're wounded through the chest, shot through the chest, and you're just going to lay there all night. And the fighting is going to go on around you. There's going to be, as Stowe says, ghouls in gray coming around checking through dead bodies for whatever they can get from them. And he's going to spend the night right there on that rock. So that's the story of John K. Norwood. I got a little bit more on him, just to talk about what happened to him after the war, and I'll pick that up now. So this is where the battle would end for the 9th Massachusetts and what was left of the men. As far as Norwood and Stowe would be concerned, they wouldn't make it here. They would both be in a hospital or on their way to a hospital, and they both having long recoveries. Stowe would never return to the 9th Massachusetts. He would become part of the Invalid Corps, or what would later be called the Reserve Corps. These were men who were too injured to help in battle, but could help in other ways. John K. Norwood would leave a very interesting life, and before I get to Norwood, I'm still looking for more on Stowe after the war, but I can't really find anything yet. But I will try and keep finding more on him. But as far as Norwood is concerned, he would be too injured to come back, so he would leave service. He would fight to get his health back and get it back, and he would become president of the, oh goodness, I'll write it down on the bottom of the screen, but it's like the 9th Massachusetts Historical Society or something like that. I'll write it down here. But he would in turn help Batchelder place monuments on the field, and he would disagree with Batchelder, and in doing so he would get not one but 3 monuments put out here. The first one where we started on the Wheatfield Road, the second where at the Trossel farm, where all the horses, the pictures of the horses dead was taken, where their main fight was and where they were overrun, and the third here, where the third day's fighting took place. They were involved in Pickett's Charge, which took place right out here. They would also help destroy what was left of the Bliss farm, which was out there. It had already been burned down, but they're still having some troubles out there, so they laid some cannons into it. But that's where their day would end, and this is where Gettysburg would end for the 9th Massachusetts Battery. I hope you've enjoyed this, and look for some more videos coming up, and thank you for watching Big Little History.